Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us here at what is the end of a very strange semester. This project has really been a great opportunity for us to think more about this current moment that we're in, how it's going to shape the future of our lives as students, as everyone tries to find a new normal in the post-COVID world. So we're really excited to share it with you. Our group members are Miranda Bibb, Zoe Elliott, me, Maya Fraser, Maho Kobayashi, and Yikai Su, and our project is called The Sanctuary. The design for the sanctuary is influenced by our experiences attending university remotely during the pandemic. Social connection, privacy, and outdoor space have all been difficult to find.
So our solution is a building that functions as a miniature urbanism. Living spaces, workspaces, and community areas are situated within a covered outdoor space called the umbrella that runs throughout the property. This allows students and their families to engage with the wider community, take solitude when they need to, and escape the digital realm through engagement with plant life. Next. There are two major constituencies served by the building. One is the residence, which consists of a group of around 30 to 35 graduate students, 10 to 15 partners, and around 5 children or other dependents. The second constituency consists of members of neighborhood community who will have access to much of the site.
We planned that the public areas of the building will serve as a third space for the community. A third space is a neutral space that is not home or work and provides people a chance for bonding and belonging. In our case, we wanted to promote socializing between students and non-student alike and provide amenities to the community.
Spatially, the building is organized in a series of interlocking cylinders, with an overall program assigned by cylinder. The transitional areas between the cylinders are covered by the umbrella, a 10-foot-high transparent roof. The umbrella creates a unified space through the first story of the cylinders, many of which are glass or can be opened up to the outside during the warmer months. It invites urban life into the site, encouraging people to engage with each other outside the digital. The green space under the umbrella allows students to step away from the digital world.
The whole project is structured around the idea of creating a mini urban environment. The site of this building lends itself well to this type of relationship between space and user. The site is between the back of a commercial lot and a main street, which attracts residents and commercial businesses from the surrounding neighborhood to the site. The other two sides of the building border on a pedestrian pathway and an alleyway, also creating urban connections. Our building also emphasizes community engagement through multiple benches and seating spaces, outdoor areas, 2 pickup counters where residents and neighbors can grab a bite to eat, and a recreational laundry room. The blue lines in this diagram indicate scooping up people from the outside, encouraging community relations. The umbrella promotes fluid urbanism through creation of serendipitous interaction. Overall, we wanted to specifically create a multifunctional space that could be used by many and build community relations within a shared neighborhood space. The irregular nature of the space under the umbrella makes it suitable for a variety of activities, from one person enjoying a moment alone to a larger group gathering for dinner outside. Hopefully, this can be a reality sooner than later.
Horizontal circulation occurs at the ground level underneath the umbrella. The upper floors are joined through connections between cylinders, so it's possible to travel from one end of the building to the other through these connections. The vertical circulation consists of elevators in the elevator core and laundry, stairs in the workspace, and a ramp in the community eating area. The eating area ramp, the study space stairs, and the elevator serve as circulation for residents only, upper floor living spaces. The living area has an open bottom floor for people to get access to the garden space. Another important thing for us was to have a privacy gradient. While the vast majority of spaces are open to all students or to the entire community, each student has access to a private room and bathroom. In addition, most public spaces are designed to create moments of privacy or semi-privacy within them. The interesting in-between spaces produced by the cylinders create many places to catch a quiet moment underneath the umbrella. The kitchen has recessed eating areas for more privacy, while the laundry room and work area each have private meeting areas. This flexibility means that students will always have a place to go as their needs change, whether that's from month to month, hour to hour, from an impromptu open mic session in the communal kitchen to a moment of mindfulness in the garden.
Each cylinder is devoted to a particular program. These include living space, laundry, kitchen, and study spaces. However, we also prioritize flexibility within these programs so that students can have the possibility of studying in the eating space, hanging out in the study space, or napping in the laundry room. Now we will go over these spaces in more detail. So the first floor contains the garden areas, which are for socializing and playing and eating and meditating in certain areas. It also contains 2 walk-up eating counters where you can grab a meal and go sit in one of the benches and enjoy the day. We also have open floors in the laundry room, so one can go and hang out on the lush faux green grass. And then we also have, for students who wish to access the study spaces and bathroom cores from the outside, an opportunity to do so through this pathway. On the second floor, we have more laundry and a quiet meeting space. We also have some living spaces up here as well. This transitions into the kitchen eating area, which is connected by a ramp. This is an open floor eating space with varying degrees of for eating needs. We also have on this other side a bathroom core, which contains a bathroom, an elevator, and some green space. And this connects to student study spaces, which contain individual nooks for more private studying. Finally, the third floor has a similar layout to the second floor, with the only addition being in the laundry space. There is a window for residents to come and drop off their dry cleaning, which will be picked up by a local laundromat to be done and brought back to the window.
We chose these specific wood materials because we wanted to emphasize experiential moments through the texture and to step away from the digital space, which can't always be a substitute for reality. Glass was also highly utilized because we wanted to offer views of the outdoors and also interactions with plants through viewership. Glass was also highly utilized because we wanted to offer views of the outdoors. Adding the greenery onto the windows was a way to create privacy in certain spaces, but also make experiential moments in the interior. Here's our first section. Here's our second section.
The public cylinders face the street and facilitate larger community engagement through food pickup counters and outdoor bench seating. We wanted to think of the kitchen, which is the largest outward-facing cylinder, as an open celebratory space, highlighting the importance of gathering and togetherness. Residents and visitors can also migrate up the ramp to the connected eating area on the second floor, which also doubles as a gathering area, complete with large open seating areas, which can host neighborhood meetings, community gatherings, and other activities. The largest, The kitchen is complete with multifunctional cooking stations and food prep areas, allowing for community potlucks. Cooking classes and a chef are offered on weekends for the community and residents to partake in. On weekdays, during lunch hours, local businesses can sign up and use the shared kitchen space to promote their goods and services within the community.
Then one can cross the courtyard underneath the umbrella to the laundromat, where residents and community members can come and do their laundry. This area contains ample lounge space to relax, play games, and view movies. This is done purposely to break up the monotony of waiting for your laundry to be finished at the laundromat and provide a space for the community and residents to connect with each other. Additionally, there is a window located on the third floor of this building where residents and community members can drop off their dry cleaning, which will be picked up by the local dry cleaner every other week.
Connected to the living spaces through a core containing bathrooms, an elevator, and a green space is the student study cylinder. On the ground floor, which I've neglected to mention earlier, there is an open work area where larger, louder gatherings can take place and more studio type work can be done. On the second and third floors of this space, there are meeting rooms where group projects can occur, and most importantly, a quiet place for students to attend Zoom classes. This is a small, big thing that we felt was lacking in our own context at the moment and is something we wish for our inhabitants to have in this space. Also on these floors are small, more private nooks that are meant for individuals to work privately.
The largest private space is the residential cylinder, which contains 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. Having multiple layouts allows us to cater to the wide range of familial situations in graduate school. The 2 and 3 bedroom units also have living room areas contained within them. And then all units open to the hallway that contains small centralized kitchens, which encourage serendipitous interactions.
That concludes our presentation. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we look forward to hear your feedback.
Joy Knobla, who is a faculty member here at Taubman College, assistant professor and co-director of the doctoral program. Also knows these students from their concurrent history course. So it's nice to have her here to look at the design work of the students. And Rebecca Smith, who is a PhD candidate student here at Taubman College, and then is pulled in to teach in various parts of the program as well. I don't know if he's here yet, but also McLean Clutter will be joining soon. McLean is the chair of the architecture department. So yeah, so this part of the process will just navigate a Miro board. So if any of the critics want to kind of zoom in on something, I'll do my best to track visuals to the conversation, but feel free to direct me as well. So floor is open.
So maybe just a quick clarifying question, which is, you talked a little bit about the relationship between the project and the urban context, and I'm wondering, or the community context, and I'm wondering, was there an actual site in mind for this, or what do you know about the community that surrounds the project, or how are you imagining the community that surrounds the project if it isn't an actual location?
So for the project, we were given sort of a generic urban condition. I think Adam mentioned that in the beginning. So it's located next to a commercial strip, and maybe Adam, if you could show the site plan, perhaps. So located next to a commercial strip, and then also residential areas with like streets on two sides, an alley on one, and a pedestrian pathway on the other. We weren't really given much context for, like how wealthy of a neighborhood is this? Where in the United States is it? Those sorts of details. So I think we were sort of thinking of probably a generic place, kind of like Michigan, where there would be, Four Seasons and kind of embedded in a neighborhood, I guess, similar to Ann Arbor in some ways.
Well, maybe a related question, you could talk about how you envisioned or the different attitudes you took to the different sides of the project, whether you see any difference between one of the four sides or not, and how that might have been incorporated into the project.
So I guess maybe this is, I don't know if I'm interpreting correctly, but our front facing, if we're looking at the kitchen and the laundry space, like if we were looking back at the program or not a program, site diagram of some sort. Yeah, though the laundry and the kitchen were placed deliberately on the commercial street as more of a public access point. And then this narrower alleyway in the back, we felt was perfect for more private spaces, which were student only. So our study space, our private bathroom court, and the student living spaces. So that was kind of the way we decided to orient things so that it could flow with the site, and we could grab people from the outside community and have them reside in the areas that we thought would best serve them.
So I think it's really exciting that you're, you're sort of trying to imagine different ways that graduate students could be living in the project, and you're trying to imagine different sort of configurations. And you talk a little bit about, like maybe they have partners with them, or maybe they have children with them, which is pretty exciting. I think for me, just because I am really interested in the potential of remote learning as a way to perhaps diversify architectural about who might be a graduate student or who might be a student in this context. So I don't want to necessarily like overburden your project with things that you're not trying to take on, but I think that there's something in how Adam sort of described the premise of the project that I thought was really exciting, sort of in that regard. And I know that you have talked a little bit about, you know, sort of wanting to be open to the context of the built environment on multiple sides. But I guess I wonder a little bit about like the extent to which a bunch of graduate students might represent a certain type of demographic, and if it's in a location where other people maybe don't have access to the same resources, having a bunch of graduate students living right next to them and like walking through their front yard might be a little bit, you know, off-putting, or like those kinds of questions, which I know are, again, I don't know how much that responds to the values that you all are wanting to pursue in your project. But as soon as you start talking about having a relationship with the adjacent community, I think those are the sorts of things that come to mind for me. So I'm wondering if, like, are these things you've been thinking about, or like, are you interpreting it differently, or like, yeah, like, how are you thinking about these kinds of issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we sort of envision this as a community resource in a certain sense. I mean, obviously, there are probably always going to be some kinds of clash. You know, there are always tensions in bringing together different groups of people. But in this case, we want it to be a place where those tensions get bridged. And part of that is by providing material resources to the community. So we plan to have meals that are available to the community for free there. And just to have this sort of organic, like, you sit next to somebody as they're also doing their laundry, and you end up just randomly talking about something that you never would have talked about before. And just how bringing people together in space can also kind of bring them together socially. But I think that is a really important consideration, you know, thinking about gentrification and how you actually make it integrated in a meaningful way and not just kind of paying lip service to that idea.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead, please.
Oh, and adding on to that idea, I wanted to note that we also tried to make the laundry room recreational as well. So it's not just like about waiting for your laundry to be done. It's like engaging with like the site and the building, and like, you know, by watching a movie, or like, you know, playing a game, or like, you know, maybe studying, doing homework, or, you know, having, you know, just having activities that would bridge the gap possibly between those between groups of people. So we've really definitely thought about how to bridge, or try to bridge, that gap between people through like counter spaces. Like, you know, somebody could just walk up to the site, grab like a sandwich and have a seat on the bench, and then, you know, maybe they could like, you know, also grab something while they do their laundry. So we've definitely thought about how to bridge that gap.
I think those are great. Those are great answers. The one thing that I would suggest as you move the project forward for portfolio purposes is maybe to just detail some of the spatial implications of the answers you guys both gave, because those were very nuanced and very exciting. And like the idea that you might, like, instead of a model where you're like, we're going to give something to the community, right? And you're like, we are the ones who have the privilege and the education, and the community are these other people. What you both just described are these moments where it's like, kind of just like people are together in a space and they're using the space, and maybe they talk to each other, or maybe they're just sitting on a bench next to each other. And it's a lot less this sort of model of like us giving something to these other people. It's more like allowing spaces for folks to kind of intermingle, which is really exciting.
So there's a few different levels that we can talk about this project on. You know, we can talk about the kind of social entanglements that come with putting grad students in a community of any type. But as you said, we don't know which community this is. We have no idea where we are in the world. It could be a really impoverished community that's really right close to a university, which happens all the time. Universities have these really tenuous borders between low-income communities across the country, especially some of the older land bank universities, which gets even to another layer of complication. Or it might just be a college town, right? It might be like, you know, this is stuff that everybody understands, or it, you know, it might not even be in the United States, so who knows? But assuming that it's in the United States, we might start to think a little bit more about a separate issue of property, and that Adam was talking about before, and how we deal with property here, which gives very different readings or understandings of what the front side of, and assuming that site plan is oriented north, that the south street facing side is going to be very different from the side yards, right? How side yards are used or owned in any low density community like this is very, very different, and the residential side is going to be very different from the side that's backed up on the commercial side. So that requires different responses. And then the alley is a whole different, set of conditions that we have to think about. And all four of those sites is very, very unique, right? So even though this is a proto site, those four conditions give enough differentiation to each of those sites to push back, to have some kind of pushback on what the project becomes. And I think that usually suggests something beyond just programming, right? Beyond mere program location, but how do we access how do we deal with the ground surface? How do we access different faces? And how does the way that we face the building change the way that we're thinking about different sides or faces of the building? Then of course, like southern exposure, assuming we're in the northern hemisphere, things like that start to get into ecological concerns. But I'd rather talk about the project in terms of the precepts of the semester, of the curriculum, right? That it's, we're dealing with thinking about imagery, image as surface, image as object, image as space. How do we transition and toggle between those different layers? And I think there are parts of the project that are really successful in finding spatial narratives that and formal languages that align well with the translation from image to object. But some that start to fall apart because we're still grappling with, how do we make space occupiable for humans at a certain scale? And I think that is the biggest challenge, and it's going to be a tripping hazard for anybody going through their first semester of architectural design. So if we go to the kind of isometric overview of the building, I'll show you a couple areas that I think have areas of opportunity. Maybe the other one to the right of that one. Where I think the proposal has the most potential. Well, first of all, we'll say that the cylinder is a really, really difficult formal typology to occupy in any human occupation, right? It's great for wheat elevators and silos and things like that. Not that great for laying out apartments, right? As I'm sure you guys tripped on. But some of the things that you start to do with the outside, the exterior of the building starts to suggest that the real potential of it, right? So, where we have this area here, that kind of cutout of that main cylindrical volume. My first, my initial response to that would be that the plan below it might start to reflect some of what this thing is suggesting on the outside. So I might start to say that this in the front is a more open area. And then when I get the more cellular parts of the plan, it's going to happen in the areas that are under the wood, right? shape. That's a great place to put some of this green surfacing here, but not such a good place to put that floor plate, right? So maybe that floor plate doesn't cut through the middle of that U shape on these facades, right? So maybe that's another place where I could actually start to cut back that floor plate and have a double height space. So now the interior volume is reflecting the logic of the exterior, and that's another way of translating these image-based things. Where it works the least, or let me just be less democratic and say where's the biggest train wreck, I think, is in this larger volume. So all of that here, so those as potential formal typologies for laying out the inside is great. However, underneath that, you just have these two rings, and you start to chop up these rooms into these pie-shaped spaces that just, you know, I'm sure you notice it just don't really work. But imagine if that were a really beautiful open space that then was double height or triple height, and then this is another double height space, and this might be a single height open space, but then everything else starts to resolve itself within here, right? So we start to, you know, find ways within that, within the structure, or some other language, some other formal language that works within that to resolve that a little bit more. It's rare to see any cylindrical base plan that works. It's really, really difficult to do. I think WW Architecture does it pretty well in one of their projects, or a couple of their projects. Sarah Whiting and Ron Whitty, they've done a couple good ones. Most other projects that try to do a cylinder plan are pretty bad.
Can you talk a little bit more about your privacy gradient? Like why is that something that you felt was particularly important for how you sort of thought about programming the spaces? I think that's a really interesting idea. And I think it's an interesting thing to kind of focus on as something to give particular attention to.
I think there were two main reasons. One was just that we found within our group, when we were talking about kind of our vision for the project, we had a really wide range of how much privacy people wanted. You know, I'm very like, I'm extroverted. I want to be around people all the time. Other people are like, I want to be alone most of the time. And so how do you kind of incorporate both of those into the same project? And then also just, I think everyone is struggling a lot during the pandemic right now with finding spaces for privacy and socialization. And since you're going to be spending a lot of your time on this property as compared to, you know, maybe a more traditional university setting where you go off to class and come back, we thought that kind of providing people a range of options that let them move to where they're comfortable throughout the day would be, you know, I guess really important for making it a good living situation, and one in which you didn't feel like you were trapped all the time in the same space.
Yes, I second that with Maya said. Definitely there was definitely some differences of opinion on how much privacy people wanted. So the gradient was definitely a good way to show that. But also we wanted to have the gradient because the transition between two colors is kind of a serendipitous space almost. Like random interactions can happen, and those can be like, you know, very joyful a lot of the time when they happen. Like, you know, if you like, you know, we were mentioning before, like if we sit on the same bench and then we have a very interesting conversation or something like that. And also I wanted to point out in the chat, Joy had some notes or questions that I wanted to answer. And one of the questions is there any formal response to the orthogonal language of this context? And I guess to answer that, so I made the isometrics, and I was thinking that The overall orthogonal approach to that would be how we would fit the building into the site and how it would look, yes, from a bird's eye view, but also how it would like be experienced in terms of like people possibly walking on the street, or like how that would be interacting overall with the entire site.
And Joy also posed this really great question, kind of questioning the circle, the cylinder as a typology, and if we chose that vocabulary consciously. And the answer is yes. That was a decision pretty early on in the design process. And I think we chose it for kind of a sweeping, kind of this typology we've followed with the sweeping of the external, but started internally with, we wanted to kind of bring people to the center. It was almost more of a, we're hoping that instead of retreating to corners, which Joy follows up with, is there an opportunity to take back that corner? Or I think that was what was said.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. So you want to
Um,
follow up on that?
Sure, I'll take
Well, and I
that.
can also clarify, the corner I meant isn't the one that is, I don't know who's driving. It's one of those moments, but it's the corner,
Yeah.
I think it's in the isometric, and then it's sort of the upper right corner.
If you go to the ground plane, I mean, yeah, the ground plan, you can see it much better.
Well, or in this drawing, it's that corner. Yeah, maybe I'm off on scale. If it's a, I don't know if it's steps.
It's
or
a bench.
or-
It's a bench.
Okay.
I was thinking with that, like, the building, the living space building actually touches the edge of the site lot. And so I was thinking it would be a good way to like wrap around the site in a way, like kind of mimic the organic edge that the cylinder had to it. And so I thought that it could be like a good meditation space, because since it's near the living area, people could like, you know, go outside to like sit and enjoy the outside while like pondering things possibly. But yeah, that's the reason why it's like so tucked into that corner and everything, because I was trying to like make usage of like the odd angular pie-shaped angle almost. So I was trying to just utilize that.
Did someone ask Joy's question from the chat?
I think it has.
Yeah, I just answered that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can of course go on and on about circle geometry in the 1960s, but we don't have to do that. But
Some really cool houses, I think.
Yeah,
Some
yeah,
pretty
and community mental health centers designed in the circle to evoke the feeling of community, and there's a long lineage to these. And I think, I really support the intentions of the project, and the formal geometry is quite beautiful. I think it comes down to kind of, as you move forward, where do you want to suggest architecture can have an impact? Do you want to suggest that it's, and we've talked about this extensively, but like, is it the metaphorical image of the circle that is important? Is it you're saying bringing to the center? Is it a literal bodies together in a center? Is it a metaphor? And then questions of like that bench, like, it's just how you approach it, but, you could turn the bench the other way. And then it becomes a place to sit and watch people walk by. And if I'm a person walking by, I feel far more invited and empowered to sit on that bench than if I have to walk around the other side and be in your garden and sit on it. And so we can also argue that a lot of that doesn't do a whole lot, and it's really the empowerment at another level that chooses whose bench I sit on. But I think just as you move forward, those are the moments. you know, I mean, it's a beautiful set of drawings. It's a beautiful, beautiful presentation, and I totally applaud you for moving to this point. So that's just, you know, for next studio. But those are kind of moments where you can develop your own stance on what does architecture do for sociability.
Great. Okay. Thanks, group 4. I think we should move on to the next project. So group 5, the next group, please join the Zoom call, and then the rest of us can sign off of Zoom and tune into the Twitch again for the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. We are Group 5. We're called Ramp House, and today we're inviting you to explore our design concept. So on the next slide, we're going to be asking ourselves, what does caring architecture mean? So as our cohort has explored through readings and discussions this semester, we've been defining care through political, historical, and formal lenses. This assignment challenged us to specify a definition of care and bring it to life by radicalizing the typical university dorm structure. And this is of special significance when taking into account the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, more than ever, we need to be aware of, if not actively cultivating, the presence of care in our relationships, both to each other and to our environment. We have designed a building that accommodates the needs of the non-traditional student and their dependents. This is an individual that has to juggle both domestic and academic responsibilities at minimum. While formalizing the programs and forms for the building, these students were at the heart of our design decisions. Namely, we were concerned with lines of sight. While every guardian is different, one priority that tends to remain consistent among them is keeping an eye on their children. So we can move on to the next slide, where we're going to walk through the floors and clarify the more salient parts of our architecture and program. So there are three main tenets of our design. First is the continuous ramp. This takes up most of the surface area, and the majority of our moments of care are programmed into it. Next, we're going to be examining our additive language, which starts with a rectangular envelope where we punch out apertures and thicken the perimeters. And this is especially evident in the learning towers. So these are 4 climbing structures nested on the perimeter, which are accessible at every level. These forms infuse a sort of playful energy into the design, encouraging adults as well as children to embrace a lighthearted energy throughout their day. Next, we will explore our pod typology. So in an effort to create moments of productivity, collaboration, and privacy, we have developed learning pods as well as sleeping pods. On the next slide, we'll see the mezzanine of the 3rd level, where we can see more sleeping pods. And so these pods facilitate learning opportunities as well as care activities by granting parents a vantage point to their children as they work. So along with the relatively open plan, we've made visibility a priority. On the next slide, we're going to explore the various programs that we've allocated to certain spaces in the building. This GIF highlights the parts of the program in circulation that inhabitants will be most likely to populate as the day progresses. So first, there's the orange spaces are dedicated towards working, green ones are towards cooking and eating, the red ones are the bathrooms, and the blue ones are for sleeping. And so we are just speculating that at 7 a.m., the circulation will be mostly on the upper levels. As time goes on, like near 10 a.m., you'd be like preparing, you'd be eating or like preparing yourself for the day. And so the circulation is on the 2nd and 3rd levels. And then as the day goes on and you start to settle into your work or school days, you populate the lower levels of the building. Of is here to see by building, the occurrence of domestic or care activity increases, or at least we expect it to increase. We've programmed it that way. So now I'll pass it on to Will to explore the more specific moments of care that we are trying to generate.
So when you look at our sections, you can see that our building is primarily broken up into 4 different levels. As Iman mentioned, the top 2 levels contain primarily what we call housing pods or residential pods, which is where our residents will be sleeping. The 2nd level is both home to our kitchen and primarily takes up space for the ramps to transition people from the flexible ground floor to the 3rd floor, which is a double height ceiling with those 2 upper levels. You can see that there's a visual and spatial connection on the upper 2 levels that allow for lots of good lines of sight required for care work. When we move into the vignettes of the different sections, you can see on the ground floor, there are lots of good lines of sight so that if you're perhaps working or playing in the flexible space in the ground floor, you can easily be seen and see both the ramp, which serves as both circulation and flex space, and the workspaces. On the second vignette, you can see the variance in the third and fourth levels of the building, which provide lots of good lines of eyesight from people in the residential area to other aspects. And finally, you can see in the third vignette, kind of the moments that are created when the ramp is carved away and the difference between the ramping platform and the planar surfaces of more traditional floor plates. When we move into the next section cut, we can see clearly through the ramp, and we can see even more of these moments that are created in the varying heights that occur. And so again, you can see the sleeping pods on the upper two levels. And when we move into the vignettes, we can see the visual connection from the working pod on the ground floor to the ramp outside, with a person perhaps working, or in this case, standing and looking out on a child on the ramp, or to the ground floor beyond. Again, you can see on the second vignette, the varying of level and the lines of sight that are created throughout the circulation that's provided by the ramp. And in the third vignette, again, we can see the varying heights of the ramp by two folks just talking to each other, one presumably in the walkway on the second floor to the kitchen, and the other either ascending or descending from the second level to the third level. And I'll pass it on to Harmon to speak a bit about our site plan.
Thanks, Will. The site plan, of course, gives an idea of where the building is located. On the right of our building, we have commercial corridors, where on the left side, it is primarily residential. From the sidewalk, we can see the possible circulation paths to the different entryways of the building. On the next slide, the rolling elevation here shows the finished appearance of our building's facade. The windows, doors, and skylights are of varying shapes, which correlate with the squares, circles, and pill shapes that are seen within the interior of our structure. Now, Deezy will talk more in detail about the floor plans.
Thank you, Harmon. So upon entering the building from the street side at the bottom right corner, you're immediately greeted with the two prominent architectural elements, the ramp and the vertically extended learning towers. We were trying to explore a contrast between different design languages, solid versus void, aggregations versus carved away, and horizontal stretch versus vertical stacking, or something you will experience throughout all levels of the building. The entire back half of the space is packed with vertical towers. 3 of them are vertical circulation points, the elevator shaft on the left wall, and we have staircases at the 2 back corners. In comparison, the front half is a big void open flex space. The color and material choices of the ramp house was experimenting with an abstract and playful approach to bringing a nature scheme. We were also experimenting with breaking the conventional ways of visual separation of different planes, as some of our materials on the flooring will be extended up to the wall and onto the ramp. The ramping system in our design is deeply immersed with various activities to put forward a strong sense of topographical living scheme. As you can see in the top right corner, the staircases and the washroom area in this level are accessed through going under the ramp. The area directly beneath the ramp is spaces that can be utilized for functions such as mechanical or storage. And the learning pods at the back are sunk into the ramp and accessed through going down steps in the carved out alleyways. So the front of the ramp feature a sliced away step seating, which creates an alternative modes of going up the ramp and opportunity for activities. So following this ramp, once you land on the second level, near the top right corner, right in front of you is another prominent ramp. As you can see, there are pods half pushed into the ramp and also some vertical carved away nooks and mini tunnels underneath that with extended out color shapes on the ground that invites children to go in and play. And in the middle of the ramp, you see a big carved-in pathway. And following this pathway, you will enter the cooking and eating space underneath that encourages actions of collective care and communal dining. So coming out from the side opening of this area, you will see a colorful archway tunnel that invites you to travel through the back wall, which that is how the learning pods on this level are accessed. And with this created like a loop circulation on the second level. And going up the ramp on this level will lead you to the primarily residential floors above. And once you land on third level, at the bottom left corner, you see a landscape of small-scale standing pods on a grass textured flooring that hints a sense of mobile camp life. The back wall learning pods are also extended up. And by the wall on the right, we have an aggregation of individual units of shower, toilets, and sinks to support the care of day-to-day living. The sleeping pods on this level will be introduced in more detail later, but before that, let's follow the little set of stairs in the middle to go up to the mezzanine level. As you can see, this level is a very bright and colorful space for sleeping with a different pod arrangement language. The row of cleaning units are also stacked up onto this level as well. And through the help of different colors and flooring and a lazy river style circulation paths, this mezzanine level floor plate reads as a collection of different individual pieces linked together. So next I will pass it on to Iman to talk more about the third level sleeping pod design in a bit more detail.
Thank you. So we understand that families come in many configurations, and these sleeping pod arrangements take that into consideration by allowing for various degrees of modularity. The base level of the third floor follows the grid more closely, as can be seen in the plan. Accordingly, the massings are entirely rectilinear. So on the grid that you're seeing, this is oriented towards the individual, is a thin gridded structure where the top rail holds sliding panels that serve as flexible partitions, facilitating moments of privacy, creative expression, and collaboration. The bottom rail holds sliding furniture, which along with the pods allow inhabitants to customize their space. Interrupting the strict grid, the sleeping pods are freewheeling with a closet and bookcase attached to the unit. These are able to be packed away or moved to the preferences of the inhabitants. The curtains also bring an element of softness to the grid. On the next slide, we'll look at grid types 2 and 3, which are oriented towards families or those who wish to live in an enclosed unit. As such, these are thicker, more stereotomic structures. The first type is 2 twin XL units attached to a full bed with a small hallway, allowing an inward moment of privacy. And the twin XL units have the capacity to hold bunk beds, allowing more flexibility for both family size and rooming preferences. And the latter structure is 4 twin XL units facing each other. And this type allows for both the individual nature of the first pod type while preserving the privacy of the second pod type. Now I'll pass it on to you, Chen, to talk about the pod typologies of the mezzanine level.
Thank you, Iman. Connected from the third floor is the mezzanine level, which can be accessed from the staircase on the northeast corner or the small stair on the orange plate. This mezzanine level is arranged in vibrant colors to show a sense of randomness as well as a mood of playful and interactions. Moving on to next, the concept is generated through an interpretation of traditional dorm row style. First, we have a back-to-back dorm row traditional arrangement, then by various arrangement, like sliding it, rotated by 90 degrees, or rotated in any angle, or even combine them together, or we can create multiple forms from the arrangement of pods. We also might thinking about maybe this opportunity for third bedroom to accommodate more various needs. Some of the forms are generated as backgrounds, as bedroom, as you can see on the next slides. They contains like double rooms like this, or maybe double room with some shared space, double room with relatively privacy spaces, or Japanese style compact living tatamis, or maybe double beds for couples, as well as triple rooms. Moving on to next, you can see that we have the idea of modular units by 4 elements: C, deep C, L, and large L. They are arranged in multiple ways to create the functional living spaces, such as dorm row, friend privacy, study, tatami, student with family, and a couple with kids. And on the right, you can see the isometric drawing of these pods and how we'll arrange in the spaces. Move on. This is a perspective view of the people on the plates. As you can see, these plates are arranged very close to each other, so interactions between plates are encouraged, but still they maintain some distance to achieve the level of privacy. Also, these individual units can be further enclosed by closing the curtains on the walls, for example, during the nighttime, or they desire privacies. They also have the view on the main third level commons, as you can see here, like people might playing underneath it, and have various interactions happening along them. Moving on to next, you will see the entrance to the mezzanine level. Here, it is lands on the green plate, where it forms a small public style plaza where various interaction happens. And also you can have a sense of the first person perspective view of the pods here. Next, Aaron will move you through our designs and buildings.
Thanks, Stephen. So our perspectives are coming from the ground floor to the third floor, and we're using these perspectives as the introduction to the ramp and how they create collective agreement with the pods or cohesiveness. So the first rendering, we can see how the first floor acts as a social environment for the kids to play while the parents can study or work on other things within the learning pods. This space over time can also change with the maneuvering of the furniture. So you can see the furniture over here and you can see the pods right here. Moving on to the second perspective, this space shows the ramp as an active study space where a parent can study and be able to look for their children by using the transparency of the glass. You can see that right here with looking at their child or toddler while they're still studying within the domesticity of a learning environment. And then the next slide is a ramp from the second floor to entering the third floor. The small elements like the catwalk hovering above. The ramp gives us a subtle introduction to the third floor and the living spaces. We can also see this with the materiality of the ramp and the shift from the man-made materials like concrete and terrazzo from the first floor and this floor to the introduction of natural materials like grass and natural finished wood. So the grass is here, and then on the next slide, we will see the finished wood. So finally, the third rendering perspective, or the fourth rendering perspective, is of someone looking outside their sleeping pods. This perspective shows how we can understand the space as a multi-family living within the mezzanine above and the pods below to indicate form of privacy for families. Now we can pass this on to Ishan to introduce our video during our intermission. Thank you.
we're on the next scene.
Okay, great. All right, welcome back everyone. Here's the conversation. Miro board is up and ready, so floor is open.
So I'll talk about this one similarly in terms of image and form and image to form translation and to space as well. But I will say that the proposal in the site is definitely responding a little bit more clearly to the sightedness of the site, right? So, you know, having a kind of main entrance, a kind of front facade along the street, side sides that aren't really too side-like, but you know, they may be a bit more porous than we would expect for a side yard or side lot on the residential end or commercial side. But the alley side does then get layered with a lot of this heavier, thicker parts of the program, right? Like the stair cores and all of that stuff on the alley side. So I think it's a pretty successful response to the very rudimentary site conditions. I also enjoy the hyper elaborate response to material, and that's more image and texture than actual material. It's probably more similar to the way that Jennifer Bonner deals with her House Gables project, where all these things are just like wallpaper that are suggesting materials and not real material distinctions. And that starts to relate more to like these programmatic zones that you have and the different layers and levels. So it's, as something that's responding to a specific image, I think it's a kind of enjoyable graphic narrative. And that's contrasted with the stark white on the outside, right? I think there is, the building is a bit of, a camel. I'm not sure exactly, it's a little bit of a camel, or it might be something a little bit better. And by a camel, I mean, a camel is a horse designed by committee, right? Something where you're trying to throw all these disparate parts together and they may not work together into a cohesive whole, but they kind of work pretty well individually. I think it feels like 4 or 5 different design strategies happening, or design elements. The wrapper is one thing, the 4 sides, all with these randomized or irregular cutout holes in the face to create windows. The logic of that seems to be separate from any other logic, right? So that unwrapped elevation is showing that there's a kind of 2D graphic that is superimposed onto that unrolled elevation. Again, there's nothing wrong with it individually. I'm responding to it as a separate thing from what's happening inside. And so on the inside, you have these lower 2 floors that start to work as a kind of solid, almost like a solid mass sometimes, where the slope is being cut out of that. The ramp is being cut out of this solid mass. And those 2 floors, if those were the entire project, then I could call that, that's a ramp house, right? Like that is like ramp as house, solid void, everything cutting out of that. I think my favorite area of the project 3-dimensionally is what's happening on the 2nd floor, where that ramp is now going up on both sides, and then the cutout space is showing a kind of thickened cheese wedge of of mass, right? Like that, that's a nice image as well with the green desk thing, circular area poking in there. So that's kind of my favorite space there, right? I think it's better in this image than it was in the walkthrough with all the various materials, because we're starting to see the yellow stuff as kind of the flesh being that is revealed after you cut through the green skin of the surface. But then when you go above that, the third and fourth floors start to be like two other design strategies that are very different, right? So the meandering walkway and the little residential pods, and then that stair that seems completely foreign to the project, but is maybe similar to the handrail of the stuff above. So it's kind of flat area with a bunch of things above that, with a bunch of things inside of it. So it seems kind of discontiguous from the rest of the project. Very different in character from the rest of the project. The stuff that's aligning but then it's gone on the fourth floor. But the other stuff, the little sleeping pods and the track thing, they all seem very foreign to the project. In one way, it might be okay. It might be a kind of OMA project where they put a bunch of programmatic pieces together in a kind of box and they shuffle it all up and it starts to make sense because they're OMA. We all kind of love it. But in this case, something about it isn't just sitting well. It feels like 5 people designed this or 6 people designed this, right? It doesn't feel like a contiguous whole as yet. Not to even start to get into the technicalities of what happens when somebody is sleeping in a pod that's in the middle of a room that doesn't really get direct light and air and has people walking around it at different times at night or through the day. It's the sleeping pods part of it seems to have a lot of energy invested into it with a result that isn't as successful as as some of the other parts. It doesn't feel as resolved as it should be. Very different part of the project. But all in all, and then I didn't even talk about the roofscape, which is maybe a 5th project. But all in all, I think it's a pretty fun investigation. Where it works best is probably in that cross section. I think the short cross section is where it works. It's where it feels more like an OMA project than a random jumble of things. It feels more like an orchestrated collage instead of something that is 5 different people or 6 different people trying to jockey for design notoriety. Can you say something to defend those sleeping pods a little bit more, or to convince me that this is a more cohesive project than it works out, or did I get it right?
For sure. I don't know if it's worth it to sort of go over how, like, the, I guess, genesis of the project, like how we went through like each iteration, but essentially how it started was we were thinking about a library typology. So we were like, since we're designing for university students, like what would it be? Like what would we need to provide in a larger institutional building to sort of give, like allow habitation. And so what ended up happening was that we essentially created like this library with all these facilities and then these pods to sort of house these students. So this pod, like typology, has been there since the beginning. And it wasn't so much that we were designing around the pods, but we were using the pods as a way to, I guess, make it so that, as I don't want to say forced community, but in a way that's what it was, because we didn't want people to be living in like these separate enclosed units, you know, where it's like off to the side, where people like maintain their privacy. I mean, we want people to have privacy, but we didn't want people to like, you know, not engage with the community. So what ended up happening was that we decided that pods sort of interspersed around. Originally, they were all throughout the building, but we just relegated them to the top floor in this iteration. But we decided that this way, it would allow moments of connection while also like allowing that privacy that one would expect from in a sleeping environment, in a sleeping unit. So as for like formal cohesion, it was a back and forth. So originally they were kind of that part of the thicker perimeter, but then we sort of removed it from that simply because we were trying to sort of create different languages, I guess, for each floor. So the first floor is sort of, well, first two floors are more subtractive, where we carve out from the ramp or we carve out from the floor. And then the top floor is additive. And we figured the pods would be part of that additive language. So we totally understand if it doesn't seem as cohesive because the first two floors like don't follow that language. But yeah, we'll take that into account, I guess, as we refine it for portfolios and things. Unless someone else has something to add, I think that's the gist.
Just adding points to Iman's points, I think our goals, like by creating these pods without direct access to window viewing outside, or they are relatively small in size, which only accommodates like sleeping, is like we want people to use more public spaces, or like the study pods, the living pods, leisure pods, or like kitchen unit. So like we want them to use the pods as only a sleeping place, but devoted other activities to the remaining parts of the building. And yeah, so like maybe create an environment of more cohesion and communication rather than trying to stay in everyone's own room, I guess.
I mean, why not? I'm sure you considered this at some point, but why not issue the whole idea of privacy altogether and make a kind of, you know, like barracks live-in quarters, right? Where it's an open dorm where the beds are just all out there, and you know, you sleep when you can and you don't sleep when everybody's up. And I don't know, because it feels like it would have been a more unified scheme had you engaged some of that into the thickened walls, the thickened out exterior on the north, and maybe even wrap it around the east and west sides and keep the double height space, triple height space on the southern face. And then the ramp itself could easily go up another floor or up 4 floors, right? And then it feels a little bit more, or even all the way up to the roof, right? So it could feel a little bit more that the ramp is still driving the entire project. It does feel like when we're going through the walkthrough, it did feel like I was in an airport a few times. And I don't know why.
I think there's probably a happy medium between the two, because we did consider something like that, but then we start to think about who are the people that are going to be living here. Like maybe someone had mentioned during the project, like maybe they would like to have intimate moments. Like in that case, where do you go? What do you do? Or like if someone, for whatever reason, like people just need their privacy. So we were just, this was what we arrived to, and I'm sure there are better ways to do it, and you know, we'll keep working on it. But yep, thank you.
I think really quickly to add to Iman's points, the students aren't the only, this is very much geared towards students and their dependents. And so I think one thing that we needed to consider, which actually did come across initially in like a more open living floor plan, like a barrack style that you mentioned, but we moved away from, was the fact that while students may buy into that, their dependents may not. And so while, you know, like even some of the, you know, folks in our small studio group and some of the people on this call might be comfortable living that way, you know, I don't know if my 75-year-old grandmother would, or somebody who has a, you know, 2-year-old child. And so I think that's where we try to create this like semi-permeable moments of privacy. On top of that too, like Iman said, again, with couples who maybe want some intimacy, you know, that's why we try to create kind of a flexible barrier between the public and the private.
Let me just suggest that anybody who's not comfortable living that way is probably not comfortable living this way either. Right? They might still want their room with their own private bathroom. Maybe people will be able to give up a private bathroom, but they'll still want their room with their door.
I wonder if there's, you know, I think one of the things that's really compelling about the project is, excuse me, you're really using this idea of care as sort of something that clearly drives a lot of the organization of the first couple of floors of the project, right? And so we're seeing these moments that you described really nicely in the vignettes of sort of sightlines and connections, and you take your cue for that from the need to maintain sightlines with children. But then we see that everyone who's in the project is able to take advantage of those, and that is, you know, a big driver of sort of the ramp design, right? And I think that in terms of just the way that like surface is dealt with and the sort of patterns and textures, this idea of moving really fluidly through a space where you're encountering a lot of different people and you're sort of taking in these different textures and patterns, and that's part of your circulation, that all seems to come together really well. And I guess I'm sort of wondering if there's, is there something else about this overarching idea of care that perhaps can be extended into how you're dealing with the sleeping pods, right? Like, is there something about either the challenges or the variety, or perhaps even taking a bit of a cue from our discussion of the first project, like the idea that people might organize themselves in space depending on their needs, or maybe something about, you know, what it means, as Joy was referencing in the chat, what it means to have to deal with the sleeping needs of a small child, right? Like maybe there's something in and amongst all of that that can help you to organize the sort of formal qualities of the sleeping pods in a way that gets back to that overarching theme. And I think if that was the case, even if they end up being much different than the lower floors, I think that's okay. I think it just needs to be a little bit clearer when that transition is being made, right? And like the sort of OMA thing, I think one of the characteristics of OMA projects is often that you do have a pretty clear sense of when that transition is occurring, or that the transition is intentional, or like it's just that there's a bit of clarity in when things are juxtaposed in a certain way versus when they're not. And I think that kind of clarity could be helpful, you know, as you develop the project for portfolio purposes.
I'll chime in for a little bit. I'm not sure I have all of the background of everything, but been enjoying the conversation. I mean, I'll just say, first of all, that I appreciate the energy of the project. I think that there's an awful lot of accomplishment across a lot of the individual elements of the project that you put together today. Like, I personally think that the perspectives are super convincing, and the kind of kinesis and sociality of the space that you guys are representing. And I like that, at least in some of these perspectives, it just represents the thing as a kind of assemblage of these textural panels. I like the feel and the kind of quality of those things. I also really like, and I think Joy said this also in the ramp or in the chat, I think the ramp is really great. The first floor, I'm really sold on. Like the idea that there is this kind of large social space ramp that descends and then hits ground in a super kind of free plan, open public space, I think is a really interesting and strong idea. It makes me wonder if one version of the project might have thought about the materiality of the enclosure in that first floor in a little bit of a different way. Like there's one version of the diagram that's a little bit different where maybe you would think that it's like this heavy wrapper, like you have it on the upper floors, maybe on the first floor, where the interior becomes super public. Like what if that was much more transparent, and so we understood more the space of the street coming in there, and we might understand then the ramp is a solid thing that's actually kind of like falling down from the heaviness above as opposed to growing up, or maybe it has a kind of dialogue between those two readings. But those are all things that I really appreciate about the project. I do agree that it's there's a lot going on, like, and there are a lot of I think the problem is that it oscillates between a project that seems like it wants to have diagrammatic clarity and one that is more of a willful mess, like in the best sense of the term. Like there are moments when I look at like the roof figuration, like the stuff sticking up from the roof, and then the way you've packed those kind of heavy programmatic elements on the back wall, like those things together like seem like they're the beginning of this kind of nascent diagram where really this whole thing is a kind of solid void game where we have big heavy solids that become programmatic and more private, that jumble together and create the kind of interior out of which is carved giant public space, and a ramp kind of falls down. Like there's a moment there where I want to just read it like that. And then there are other moments like in, I think like the third floor, where because the ramp goes away and because we have so much like floor, it just feels more like, again, like back to one thing Joy said, it feels a little bit more like a no stop city or a kind of continuous urban plan kind of model. Again, that's like another, the issue to me there is that it's like another flavor of diagrammatic clarity that is non-identical to the first. And so it again, it feels like it wants to be resolved sometimes, and then it just isn't entirely. But yeah, again, there are tons of things I like about it. I also really like, and I think it's clever to look at the site plan and see the way these kinds of big volumes that stick out of the top, the different shapes of clear stories, can also be read as a kind of urban texture. And the same thing with your windows. Like it's another way that the thing becomes contextual, is that the apertures and these clear stories are large enough that it starts to read a little bit like the residential texture around you. And then suddenly, even though you're proposing something that's wildly out of scale for the neighborhood in a lot of ways, there are these markers that start to make it feel like it fits in a designed and deliberate way.
Yeah, those roof extrusions were very much shepherded by Adam in a very local urbanized language. And so we actually kept having to consciously keep them small because they do correlate with the smaller sleeping pods beneath them to add extra ceiling height. And so we did try to keep those the same size as the surrounding buildings, although at least I found myself trying to push them out larger.
I mean, maybe there's an opportunity there though to, you know, like if you just had the outer wall, you know, do that or that. Like I think there is a way in which the boxiness, the commitment to the rectangular perimeter as a solid wall maybe presents a different attitude towards the context. And I think that I think you guys intend this actually to be a pretty private space. We talked early on about just like security and things like that. So, but maybe a way to balance the closed off nature of the interior in terms of who's using the building for what purpose, if that was kind of counterbalanced by word that maybe produced a relationship to the context, and then also the more internal volumes, which were about bringing light in or creating little volumetric scale, like domestic environments that were internalized.
And there is something really compelling about allowing people to find their way into those sort of nooks and crannies that are suggested by what Adam was just drawing, right? In the same way that people are able to kind of move around more freely in the lower floors. I think that idea also of letting people determine their placement within the project depending on what they need from a given circumstance, I think is something that could be pretty exciting.
Great. Well, I think it's about time to move on to the last project of the afternoon. So thanks, group 5. Congratulations. And the last group 6, can hop onto the Zoom call now, and the rest of us will tune into Twitch to watch your presentation.
Are we live?
Can we start?
Yes.
Oh, I can see us.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're group 6. My name is Ling Jing. My team members are Andrew, Melissa, Kyle, and Paul. And we're going to present our final project, Home is What You Make It. The COVID-19 has affected us all in numerous ways. The activities that were once outside the home now find their way vying for space inside the home. As a result, our team re-examined the meaning of home and concluded that home is what you make it. Learning from home poses its own sets of challenges. Isolation, disconnection, limited and inequitable resources are only a few of the many challenges facing remote learners. Considering these challenges, our team proposed a co-living and learning building that includes educational programs, living accommodations, and a makerspace. The design is centered on community, education, and accessibility. The inclusion of a makerspace truly captures the design intentions by providing a space to bring people together of all ages and backgrounds, interests, and hobbies. It creates an opportunity to explore new technology, learn new skills, and collaborate with community members and residents to make things and new relationships. The makerspace also provides access to tools and equipment that few hobbies and students can afford at their own home, while at the same time providing a place to work and learn from knowledgeable people. To better understand this building, we will look from the lens of 2 potential users, a graduate student and community member over the age of 65. First is a female graduate student. She's planning to reside at the building for a brief project. This co-op allows her to choose a length of stay that best fits her needs.
There are 2 types of room options for students and communal inhabitants for their stay: single rooms and shared rooms. Both rooms have a shared space, which include a communal kitchen and living area. While the single room offers a quaint space, it is the only solo private space in the building. A single room contains a bed with a view, a picture window, and storage for any small supplies needed. The shared room can comfortably fit 3 to 5 people. It offers a bathroom with a toilet and sink and shower. It has multiple residents in it in order to create a sense of camaraderie. While these room types are different, it is important to offer the communal and social option for interactive between the inhabitants. This section cut through the main communal living area. It sits on the 2nd level of the building and connects the kitchen pod to the 3rd level. This space provides lounging, dining, and socializing to all who reside within the building. This view is taken from the 2nd level. It shows the light well that is open to the fresh air that surrounds the building. The open air corridor has hidden gems, including a conversation pit, a study nook, as well as access to the rooftops and the interactive community that happens above. The structure used at the conversation pit brings a sense of individualism to a largely open public space. The roof offers some unique experiences, not only as an intriguing procession for exploration, but also the elevated perspective is a good place to catch the sunset or even just converse with the other inhabitants. All the single rooms contain a single washroom that is located on the top roof structure, which is available for single room, and any others are able to access from lower floors as well.
Students can find various study spots outside of the reserved rooms in order to get work done in a more social environment. These spaces are multi-purpose and can be used for numerous scenarios. The first floor features options for interior and exterior studying and also includes space for the makerspace and community restrooms. The open circulation of this floor and the doorless entrances on all sides of the building promotes a cohesion between community and building and allows for free-flowing movement throughout the structure, including to the study space indicated on the plan. This study space illustrates a way to manipulate the perspective in order to connect multiple spaces. The application of a vinyl graphic creates a presence within the space. From here, there's a visual connection to the second level, as well as to the remaining first floor circulation space to create a constant link between as many spaces as possible. The study areas on the second floor offer more of a secluded atmosphere while remaining accessible to visitors. They have a vantage point of the outside community, which allows for connectivity to others while still providing a quiet space to work. Here are a few images from these areas in the building from the second floor. The building has many spaces, giving occupants the option to retreat and relax while still being connected. These spaces are small parts to a larger whole. The procession through the building changes as users go up to the roof, revealing new and different vantage points as they travel through. The constant pathway along this level of the building creates natural interactions with others, all while providing visual continuity throughout the building and the neighborhood as a whole.
Another building user is a community member, an aging adult utilizing the tools and volunteering at the makerspace. Community members also have options to take classes, teach a class, and reserve tools. Creating a space like the makerspace reinforces the idea that learning does not stop when you're in your 20s, and the connection between remote graduate students and aging adults addresses the challenges of being in an isolated environment. While there are no specific designations for the types of things being created in these makerspaces, thought was taken in adjacency and visual connections that would lean towards certain activities occupying that space and allow for flexibility within those spaces. The floor level in 2 of the makerspaces was dropped below grade to provide an observation opportunity for communities to see the creations happening in those spaces. The next section shows the primary circulation corridor, which cuts through the center of the building mass. 3 roof openings bring light into the center, while the 2 openings on the left provide air through the building. This open-aired experience removes barriers and welcomes the community. This section cut also shows individual rectangular enclosures as part of this larger mass, which reinforces the idea that individual persons belong to a larger community. As shown through the lens of the graduate student and community member, the design for the co-op centers on community, education, and accessibility. To talk specifically about the composition of form, the team started with a solid mass in the shape of an individual home. By aggregating these solids into larger form, opportunities were discovered such as tiny study nooks and interesting sleeping spaces. This GIF tries to show the composition and the starting masses, and then a compilation of solids on top of solids on top of solids, while still allowing for open-aired, welcoming opportunity. While typical homes or living spaces are primarily private, this co-op utilizes mostly shared space.
Both residents and non-residents have spaces in terms of different kinds of activities happening within our building. During the daytime, the first floor, which has the makerspace and classroom, will be available for both of the users to enhance the relationship of the community. At night, the spaces above the first floor, including the sleeping spaces, will mainly be used by the residents to make it a more private space for long-term inhabitants. The isometric view shows individualistic areas encapsulated within larger communal space as it opens to a warm environment. The right corner is close to the commercial area, while the top left is a residential area. With the 2 main entrances on the 2 sides, the building acts as a connection for the residents and the visitors. The decals were created with the consideration of expressing varying parts of a whole. From a straight-on perspective on the street side, the facade matches up. However, as the viewer moves along the facade, the forms create new patterns until you reach the next straight-on perspective, revealing the original decal once again. This creates a unique experience as you explore the perimeter of the building. The textured wood was used to bring an organic or natural home feeling to our building. The wood texture also helps to create a layered visual effect with the vinyl decal design. As the decal continues inside the building, it visually draws you to the interior space. The decal or texture patterns continue from the exterior and interior, further emphasizing a connection with the surrounding environment. And this concludes our presentation. Thank you guys for watching.
Now for the last conversation.
I didn't want to interrupt the celebrations, and congratulations. Sometimes it's good to just be done,
Yeah.
regardless of what it is. And then you start thinking about it and then you wonder, well, am I really done? Are we really done? Kind of never done, right?
I could have changed this. We forgot about this.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, Adam, what's the render engine everybody's using in Rhino?
Enscape.
No, we just used Rhino Render.
Oh, you guys just did Rhino Render.
Yep.
For the video as well?
With the video, it's Enscape, actually.
Okay.
As well.
Yeah, I think, so we had I was on USC reviews last week and, or earlier this week. Wait, what day is today? Friday? Yeah, earlier this week, I was on USC reviews and they all had videos with soundtracks and it feels like all the soundtracks are just kind of like chosen from a library of music instead of finding them themselves. It's kind of weird music. So I usually spend the first few moments of any project being introduced to decide whether I like it or not. And sometimes there's some fluctuations within that, you know, just a general basic, do I like it, right? and usually it's a bit of, oh, I don't know if I like it yet, maybe I'll like it more, and then I usually grow to like it. And then for yours, I think I liked it almost immediately, and then didn't like it so much, then liked it a little bit more, and then now I'm kind of in the place of really liking it, or many aspects of it, right? I think so. The biggest question that I have that maybe somebody can clue me in on is, what would you think the role of orientation or disorientation is in the project? Was any of that intentional or unintentional? What does it do or help? How does it help the project for it to be a disorienting space?
I thought it kind of helped to engage inhabitants or viewers of the building. For me personally, I kind of worked on doing the decals or the kind of sticker kind of effect, and that was at least what I was trying to get at. So not sure if anyone has anything else to add on, but.
Yeah, I thought it invoked kind of a curiosity. Like if I was driving by this place or if I was walking by this place and I saw this kind of mapping on the side that was, it kind of looked abstract at first, and then you get to a certain perspective and then it all lines up and it looks, kind of like a jigsaw puzzle of pieces and colors and such. I thought that was kind of a creative way, and it kind of makes the building stand out more so, I thought.
But there's a formal disorientation as well before you even add the image texture map on top of it, right?
Right. There's also that's taking place. It's kind of this, like we talk about the stacking, right? And we wanted it like, originally we kind of flipped houses on their sides and we flipped houses upside down, just to try and get this kind of culmination of structure out of it, right? And so that's kind of what happened. It started evolving from there. Originally it was just, like a house, and then it got flipped on its side, and then 90, and then 45, and so on and so forth. And as we progressed kind of exploring those avenues, we started experiencing these new spaces within. And at first we really didn't have any space within. It was very disconjointed and things like that. But then as we started flowing through the spaces, we started omitting some of the frivolous walls and stuff that was taking place. And then that started unveiling some new spaces within.
So, yeah, because I think that, I mean, you can imagine, your first time going into this building, or somebody's giving you directions to their room, right? Like, how do you tell which room do you go to? Well, it's on the third, 3.5 floors up. It's, you take 2 or 3 lefts and a right and go up, and then another ramp, and then a stair, and then you look at the first room. It's really quite difficult, right? So I thought there was some kind of overt, and maybe there's something that you guys do in your post rationalization of the project. There's some kind of overt necessity for disorientation that you're taking you out of your comfort zones and bringing you into a space that is a little bit new, or maybe there's something about a coded language of everything, and that the people who live there and they know the key to the code, they understand the code, and people who are outsiders don't really know the code, and that may resolve some of the security issues between having some of these spaces open versus closed, right? So other things to think about, just in case you hadn't read it as something which was disorienting, there is a kind of layered, multiply layered reading orientation of the project that that becomes very noticeable when you get into the animation and into the second level. But then when you start to decode the building a bit more, then it starts to work a bit better. Then we understand the lower level as a like the idea of having this porous lower level is really quite smart, right? That it's mostly public space that has these landing spaces that are these public maker spaces or study spaces. And there's a flow all the way through. I think the section shows it really well. The section probably, this plan shows it relatively well as well. So you can enter from all four directions. And then there's these four things that come down and touch the ground. And then the second level, again, as disorienting as the second level is a kind of orientation level, is a kind of connection level. And then when you get up to the next level above that, then you have the multiple individualized rooms. And in that way, it's not much different from some mid-century, early modernist housing schemes, right? Where, and I hate to constantly draw parallels to Corbusier, but it's not much different functionally than the Villa Savoye, where things come down and touch the ground. There's a kind of base level where you can navigate in different ways. The middle level is more unifying, and then at the top, then you have the roof garden and all these other little folly things happening. So there's a kind of, as disorienting as the project is, there is a kind of layered rationality on top of it that maybe is already programmed into your DNAs, even in your first semester of architecture school, that there has to be a kind of rationale to this thing that is MC Escher-like sometimes. And you know, the decal then adds this whole nother level of disorientation, because, and the one part of the decal that is the most disorienting is that the angle of the color difference is almost the same angle as a stair, right? So when we see it against the backdrop of the stairs and the roof pitches, then we start to, it's hard to tell which diagonal is which and which way is up, what's going on. So, you know, for all those reasons, I appreciate it in terms of how nice it is, a place to live, and how much sense it makes as a residential space. There's probably a bit more debate to that, but in this space here on the screen in the bottom left, I really didn't understand that really sharp slope down to a little puddle space. I'm not sure about that, but there's a lot to like about this project.
That little ramp down is mainly for, you know, loading. If somebody did make that space a wood shop or something like that, then it's a way to get equipment, like more of a functional thing, or.
I was more talking about this.
Oh, gotcha. Mm-hmm.
And that.
Yeah, there's a lot to say about this project. I like it, and I've been sitting here like puzzling through like what would be like my way in, because it seems to suggest a lot of different readings. Like in a way, I look at especially the plan language, and it looks like some sort of strange agglomeration of like the kind of overly articulate plan language of suburban houses that's then also like turned into section. And I'm thinking, oh, this is some sort of an interesting critique to take such a kind of, I don't know, in some ways antisocial building typology and turn it on its head and turn it into something that's all about interacting with one another. But then I think like, for me, the most interesting parts are like, yeah, where Adam has landed, like this plan. Like, I don't know how you ended up with the exact units that you have with these kind of so strange angles. I think it's interesting just to observe that it is strange. to have like such subprime or like not ideal. None of them are ideal. And like if you're doing like a part to whole living unit project where you're really thinking carefully about like what is the perfect unit for shared living and what's the perfect unit for singular living, none of them look like this. Like that this is the opposite of that. And so I find that really interesting. Then I start to think like, oh, like when I look at these angles, what it reminds me of is like the is like light wells in a New York City new law tenement building, where they just kind of like come in and carve. And that's all about, that's nobody's dream. That's all about the decisions that need to be made for collectivity. And it's also like something when you live in one of those units, it's like reminds you constantly of the other. When you see that angle in your apartment, you're like, oh yeah, I live right next to somebody else. And so there's an interesting way that I think the project does that as well through this like agglomeration of non-idealized units. It seems to like constantly be reminding us in a way of the collective. And yeah, it does these other things that I think you guys are doing really purposely, like creating little niches and studies where people can go around and you know, find places to be alone. But I think it's like the way it creates this kind of dialogue between the collective and the individual that I find most interesting. And I think that's also what the most interesting thing is about the decal. Like you guys described how the decal aligns and misaligns in different places. And what I think is most like conceptually most interesting about that is that it like literally redraws the collective at different moments. Like you have a really, really, again, like overdetermined idea of like singular and collective living units here. And then the whole thing is a kind of pretty fine-grained, three-dimensional urban texture. Like in a way, that's your building. And it has a lot of the same kind of scale repeating across it. But then the decal, yeah, it's interesting because as things become like only teal, or as things become only violet, it starts to agitate the kind of modular unit language of the thing or understanding of the thing. And it starts to, for me, kind of like redraw different ideas of what the collective is, or maybe make you think and kind of think critically about what the collective is in this building and what the scales of collectivity might be.
I mean, one thing it's been mentioned, but just to underscore it, and putting this project in the context of the ones we've seen throughout the day, I think something that I think is a real accomplishment is the plan. Like you've come up with a way of like creating the massing of the building that gives you a unique plan, a unique section, a unique elevation, especially in the context of just comparing it to the last project, which was more unapologetic and it's just filling out the site boundary. This one, I think, fills out a lot of the site, but just the massing and the articulation of the kind of gable roof lines, it has this weird, it's not quite the scale of the single family homes next to it, but it's like smaller, but there's an echo of some of that formal language at the gables, etc. But the success of the plan and the section and the massing, like it's very integrated. I think that we've seen projects that look good in plan, but maybe not in section, or like great as a kind of exterior massing, but then just floor plates were inserted and more conventional sort of like room making was deployed to develop a plan. Whereas I think, you know, the unique characteristics of this in plan and section, like all of those things are attended to and developed in a way that I think is just very highly sophisticated and a big accomplishment at this stage of your education.
Yeah, I think the issue of scale to me, I think, is really the thing that makes the project successful in a lot of ways, because I agree with Seiku's comments about the sort of potential for disorientation, right? And the sort of like this line that you're trying to walk between making it formally exciting, making it interesting, making people want to engage with it and find their way through it, versus making it so off-putting that people don't want to engage, right? Or like who those different users might be, ways that it's inviting to people that already know their way through the project versus people that are visiting for the first time, those kinds of concerns. But I think when I look at things like your, your street side and commercial side elevations, the thing that to me makes it okay, despite all of that orientation, and actually really interesting, is the fact that I can tell where the entrance is. And I know that that's just like a super simple thing, but I feel like as someone, who's encountering this for the first time, just being able to understand how you find your way into it, I am able to sort of take it on faith from the way that you've put the project together, that once you're inside it, the logic will become apparent enough to you and the scale is small enough that it'll be okay, And I think that that's really successful. And that's almost, I think, the result of sort of maybe like an intuitive calibration of competing tensions on your part as you're working through what the project is giving you to resolve. So I would definitely applaud that. Yeah, good work.
Yeah, I agree, Rebecca, that the ability to find the entrance is such an undervalued ability. I think it's really, really important in architecture at all levels. I mean, how many reviews have you been on where reviewers are asking, so where's the front door, right? Like, how do you get into this thing? And I think the clarity of that in such a complex scheme is an achievement. That we can naturally find our way in there, and I really think the process of post rationalization is something that you want to go through to really embrace this disorienting nature of the project. So we can talk about wanting to have people meander through the space and not knowing where they're going. So one of the things that frustrates me about the grocery store is that they keep moving stuff around. Like, this is where my stuff is, and I'm a creature of habit. I want to know exactly where the thing is, and every time they move it, then it's like, where do I go? But they do that so that you go around the store and discover new things, so you don't get into a rut of finding the same things in the same place all the time. And so it might be nice for you to walk around the space and meet new people and discover new spaces and discover new things. It could be something that you sell as an intentional component of the project. Or, to respond to this thing that Joy was saying in the chat about, wayfinding devices being, or ease of navigation being a tool for policing and control. That if outsiders are really able to come in and easily navigate a space, then they can assert more universal control over that space, instead of having the residents have a kind of insider knowledge of this. Last thing I'll say in this vein is that it might also connect to the logics of graffiti as a language. So these decals being expressive of a kind of graffiti nature, but that graffiti has an embedded coding within it that only certain people who practice graffiti or are surrounded by or understand graffiti know how to decode. So this could easily be a project that is explicitly responding to certain implicit logics of graffiti.
I also like the idea that you might, you might move in, like if you're a neighbor, right? You might walk past this thing like 20 times before you really understand what it's all about, right? Like it may first sort of arrive in your neighborhood and you may sort of think it's like, oh, it's sort of it's weird, or it's out of place, or I don't really think this thing is for me. And then as you walk through it multiple times over and over again, you start to be able to maybe read that kind of code, right? And so this idea that it's not just a place that is for the residents who understand the intricacies of how to find their way through the building, right? Who live on the upper floors, but that with repeated visits, maybe the first time you come to it and you're the 65-year-old man who's coming to teach woodworking or whatever it is. Maybe the first time you're a little, you're a little intimidated, but you get used to it. And then you start to kind of really get excited about it, right? Or like maybe there's multiple different types of users that are visiting and they each are able to develop up their own kind of language of understanding of the building, or maybe that helps them to feel a certain amount of care for this this architecture and the things that occur in it, right? Maybe through that process of continually encountering it and deciphering it on their own terms, then they start to feel like they inhabit it more. I mean, I think there's a lot of really interesting ideas to be read into this project.
I like it.
Just as a portfolio thing, I think it would be great to do a bunch of just like plan vignettes where you're starting to think about different kinds of emergent communal activities that might happen in that communal space or on the grounds around it. But I think so much of the conceit of the project is that you really minimize living space. And so you have all of this space that's used for the community. While at the same time, everything again is really geometrically aggressive. So not anything, not everything cannot happen in all of those spaces. Certain things can happen in certain spaces, and doing some studies that kind of investigate the emergence of the loose fit between that program, those programmatic activities, and the specificities of the geometry, I think could really help to sell the project.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to Sekou, McLean, Joy, and Rebecca for joining us this afternoon. Thanks to the students for all the work. You guys are by no means obligated to do so, but if you have any parting words or final thoughts, you're more than welcome to share them with the group before we go.
Yeah, this was fun. I'm happy I joined today. You know, the platform and the Twitch space. This is only the second time I've been on Twitch, and the first time was when we were presenting our MIT presentation last week, and that was kind of a complete mess from my point of view, but other people seem to really love it. Yeah, it's nice to have this as the last review or the last project in my extended review season, and it's actually my first time being a part of any reviews at Michigan. So hopefully I'll get a chance to come by in person at some point in the future. And yeah, and I'm really intrigued that you all read that ACSA piece. I would love to have heard the conversations about it and hear people discussing it. Luckily, some of the ideas in that piece itself got rewritten and became part of one of the chapters or subsections in my book that's coming out next in April. So hopefully more people will be able to engage with that. So, but thanks again for the invitation. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, Sekou.
Can I ask a quick question, Adam? Is this, in prior years, was this size of group, this is a lot of people to work on one project, yeah?
It is.
I don't know, I think that's really interesting. I'm gonna say that you guys did that on purpose and that it's really interesting. Because I'm thinking back also to like Sekou's comments on the prior project, which I agree with. There was like, it didn't resolve into a project. There was a lot going on, but there's something interesting that happened too, which is like, I kind of believe that most of the students in that group and in like most of these groups could have followed one diagram. Like, I kind of believe that would have happened. And this is like the legacy of this studio is that this would be the place for that kind of abstract ideation, like the control of plasticity and mass through diagrammatic rigor. Like that's what would happen here. And I guess it still does, but long-winded, but I think it's interesting to put even that capacity in a space where it's subject to negotiation by multiple students. I think that's a really interesting, maybe fraught, but interesting educational experience that they're making projects about student collectives, and they are having to work on it as their first project in groups of 6. I think that's a really fascinating experiment. And so like this one, it's interesting because it holds together, it comes together because it's like fundamentally multiple. And then the prior one that maybe didn't come together entirely, that's because maybe it was like recommending itself to these like really, to a series of different diagrammatic single readings. And that's hard to do across like 6, with 6 intelligences working on it at the same time and learning how to do that at the same time. Anyway, it's kind of a sideways final remark, but I find it to be a really interesting kind of introduction for these students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you could have seen the sample set of 6, like all 6 projects, it too gave you more. You could sort of like write the postscript narrative or the postmortem of each group maybe slightly differently. Some, I think, yeah, sometimes it was a kind of formal, like complete disjunction between the parts, even more so than the last one, which maybe happened on the level of diagram. I think, in one in particular project in the beginning, each student kind of took a chunk of the building and sort of went wild with it. I mean, there was a lot more to it and it was highly accomplished, but other groups I think there's different kinds of cohesion, some on the level of like programming, some on the level of form, some on the level of like, I don't know, yeah, planning, and sometimes there was like an embrace disjunction and a kind of celebration of difference. And yeah, so, but I think it is the 5 or the 6 number, I think produces more weirdness in terms of collaboration. I think, maybe groups of like 3, you can sort of reproduce single authorship, something closer to single authorship more easily, and 6 is a different form of collaboration. So
can different kinds of cohesion be the studio subtitle next year?
I like that. All right, well, thanks everyone. Maybe the students, all students, anyone still on the watching could join the Zoom call with Lyda, Jacob, and I, just for a last moment together. For the critics, again, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, guys.
And thanks to Ishan
Thank you.
and Meg for helping out, as always.
Sean, you go to sleep.
That was great. Yeah, I'm going to go to sleep now.
Seriously.